They said the frontier was full of strange bargains, but none sounded stranger to the young maiden named Lyria as she stepped off the wagon and looked toward the lonely cabin resting beneath the shadow of the red bluffs. The evening wind carried the scent of pine, dust, and something older than both. Folks in town whispered that the Apache warrior inside that cabin had survived a battle no man should have walked away from. Some said he had taken an arrow meant for a child. Others said he fought 3 men alone. Whatever the truth was, one thing held steady. He was alive, but barely. The local ranch hands were too frightened to tend to him, so they hired her. Lyria stood still for a long moment, clutching the little cloth bag with her oils and herbs. She had never tended a warrior before, and certainly not an Apache. She had heard tales of their strength, their pride, their silence. The ranch foreman, a man called Bracken, had simply placed the coins in her hand and told her she was to give the wounded man nightly massages until he healed enough to ride again. His tone held a warning she did not fully understand. The task sounded simple when spoken out loud, yet something about it felt heavier than the bag she carried. The sky above was turning amber, sinking toward purple, and her boots sank softly in the dirt as she walked. The cabin door creaked before she even reached it, as if the place itself knew she had arrived. A line of horses tied out front snorted and stomped, restless. A wolf howled far off in the canyon. The world, she felt, was watching her. Inside, the warmth surprised her. A fire glowed low in the hearth, and beside it lay the warrior. He rested on a thick blanket of buffalo hide, his powerful frame half covered. His shoulders were broad, carved like stone, and the marks of battle told a story even before a word was spoken. His skin held the copper fire of the desert sun, and his long dark hair spilled around him like a shadow with its own breath. His name, she had been told, was Kalen. He was feared on the plains, respected by his people, and spoken of carefully by everyone else. Seeing him now, Lyria felt none of that fear. Instead, she felt the quiet weight of his strength, as if the whole room leaned toward him. Kalen stirred, but his eyes did not open. His breath was strong and deep, the kind that came from a chest built for long rides and hard battles. Lyria set her bag down slowly. Her heart beat louder than her footsteps as she approached him. She did not know if he understood English well enough to hear her words, so she kept her voice soft. "I was asked to tend to you. I hope you do not mind." He did not answer, but his hand twitched under the blanket. She knelt beside him and touched his shoulder lightly, testing his reaction. The heat of his skin startled her. It ran through her like a spark, and she pulled her hand back for a moment before forcing herself to breathe steady. She told herself it was only fear, only nerves, only the strangeness of the night. But deep down, she knew it was something else. The oils from her bag carried a warm scent. Made from pine resin and sage leaves she gathered on the trail, she rubbed a bit between her palms to warm it, then placed her hands gently on his shoulder again. His muscles, even injured, felt like coiled strength beneath her touch. The moment her palms pressed into his skin, a strange silence filled the room. Not empty, but expectant, as though the fire, the walls, the night outside were all holding their breath. With each slow motion, Lyria worked her way along his arm, easing tightness she didn't understand but felt clearly. She could not see his face fully from that angle, but she sensed his breathing shift. The warrior was aware. Awake, even if his eyes remained closed. "You are safe," she whispered, unsure why she felt the need to say it. A faint sound escaped him, low and rough, not a word but something close to one. She paused, her heart catching. She had not expected any reaction. She had been told he had not spoken since the battle. Some believed he refused to. Others thought he couldn't. She moved her hands again, slower, deeper, letting her fingers trace the hardened lines where muscles met scars. Those scars told of storms he had survived long before she ever saw him. The fire played across his skin, making shadows dance over every ridge and hollow. Her touch eased the tension around an old mark near his ribs, and his breath hitched. Lyria froze. Kalen's eyes opened. She had expected eyes dark as the stories told of him, Instead, his gaze held fire. Not wild, not cruel, but deep and alive. He looked at her as if trying to remember something forgotten. As if her presence stirred something in him he had buried for years. She swallowed and forced her hands to keep moving. She told herself to stay calm, to stay steady, but her pulse raced, as though she were the one in danger. She had been taught to read people through small movements, and every instinct inside her sensed that Kalen was not a man easily touched. Yet he allowed her hands, trusted them without a word. The room felt smaller, now warmer. His chest rose slowly beneath the blanket as she worked the oils across him with gentle strokes. She meant to keep to his shoulders and upper arms exactly as Bracken had instructed. That was the arrangement. That was the job. But as her hands drifted lower, following the tense line of muscle down his side, she felt the air change. A quiet heat curled through her fingertips and rushed up her arm like a hidden flame trying to speak. Lyria pulled her hands back again. She pressed them against her skirt, trying to calm the tremor rising inside her. The cabin felt different, heavier, as if something unseen had stepped into the room. Kalen's gaze never left her. She reached for her oils again, giving herself a moment to breathe. She reminded herself of the coins, of the promise she made to finish the job with honor. She leaned forward once more, placing her palms on his ribs with new care. But the moment her hands lowered, sliding gently along the side of his torso, the heat inside her rose stronger. It was not the warmth of the fire. It was not fear. It was a rush. Like her heart had discovered a hidden flame buried beneath her own ribs. She felt it pulse through her palms, felt it rise through her chest, felt it tighten her breath in a way she had never known before. The closeness between them shifted into something she did not have a name for. Kalen's eyes darkened, the depth she did not understand, and his hand, the one she had thought too weak to move, lifted slightly beneath the blanket, just enough for her to see he was not as helpless as the ranchmen claimed. Lyria froze completely. Outside, the wind slammed against the cabin wall, making the wooden boards shiver. The horses tied outside stomped and snorted, restless without reason. The fire hissed suddenly, sending a sharp spark into the air. Kalen's voice rose in a low whisper. The first word he had spoken since the battle, and it was her name. Before she could react, his fingers brushed against her wrist, warm and strong, stopping her breath. She stared at him, unable to speak, unable to move. She had been hired to heal him, but something in that touch told her the night was about to change everything. And just as she leaned closer, drawn by something she could not fight, the cabin door latch clicked sharply from the outside. Someone was standing there, listening, waiting. The latch lifted slow, as if whoever stood outside knew the moment would cut the silence in two. Lyria's breath tightened. Her hand was still caught in Kalen's light grip, his eyes steady on hers, unmoving, unblinking. The door creaked inward, and a sliver of cold night slipped through the gap, brushing across her back like a warning. She turned her head, heart pounding in her throat. A broad shadow filled the doorway. Bracken stepped inside. The ranch foreman, who had hired her. His rough coat was dusted with trail dirt, and his jaw clenched as his eyes scanned the room. He wasn't a man who frightened easily, yet something in his stare tonight looked uneasy, as though he had walked in on a secret he was not meant to witness. His hand hovered near the old pistol on his belt, not gripping it, but close enough to remind anyone watching that he knew how to use it. Lyria rose quickly. Pulling her hand free from Kalen's, she tried to steady her voice before speaking, but it shook anyway. "You scared me. I thought it was someone else." Bracken didn't answer. His eyes moved between her and the wounded Apache, lingering on the faint shift in Kalen's breathing, the way the warrior's gaze trailed her even now. Bracken's jaw tightened. "You're staying longer than planned," he finally said. "It's late." She nodded, clutching her bag for something to hold on to. He needed more care tonight. His muscles were stiff. "I was just finishing." Bracken's eyes narrowed slightly, though not at her. Kalen had shifted an inch on the blanket, almost a silent challenge. Bracken stepped back, giving himself more distance from the warrior's reach. "Careful how close you get," he muttered. "A man like him can wake up wild." Pain makes strange beasts out of the strongest. Callan's gaze flicked to Bracken with a spark that needed no translation. The message behind it was sharp enough to cut the distance between them. Lyria sensed the tension rising thicker than the fire smoke and stepped forward quickly. "He has been calm," she said softly. "He hasn't shown any threat." Bracken snorted under his breath. "Calm don't mean harmless. Remember where you are and who he is." Lyria turned slightly, glancing at the warrior whose eyes softened the moment he looked at her. Something about that quiet shift made her chest tighten. She didn't know why he looked at her that way, or why he spoke her name earlier, but she felt the weight of it still burning beneath her skin. Bracken stepped inside fully now, closing the door behind him. The noise made the flames in the hearth tremble. "Come outside with me," he said to Lyria. "Need a word?" She hesitated. Looking back at Callan, Bracken caught the glance and shook his head. "He'll be fine for a moment. Won't crawl off anywhere." Callan's hand twitched again, his jaw setting. Lyria didn't know if Bracken's words angered him or if it was something else entirely. She let out a slow breath and walked toward the door. The night air hit her like cold water as she stepped outside. Bracken followed and shut the door behind them. The stars were sharp, scattered across the sky like frost on black stone. Coyotes sang somewhere near the ridge, their voices rolling through the darkness. The cabin yard felt too open, too exposed, as though the night itself leaned in to listen. Bracken folded his arms, his breath fogging in the cold as he turned to her. His voice dropped. "What happened in there?" She stiffened. "Nothing. I was doing the job you paid me for." Studied her face carefully. "You sure about that?" Lyria's spine straightened. "Yes." Bracken looked away for a moment, jaw clenching. "Listen, girl. I brought you here because you've got steady hands. Folks said you were gentle but strong. But they didn't tell me you had no sense for danger." "I know danger," she whispered. "It's not like this you don't. That man in there ain't some ranch hand with a bruised back. He's Apache. A fighter. He's lived through things worse than wolves. And he's not weak just because he's hurt." "I never said he was weak." "No, but you're acting like he can't hurt you. I've seen his kind wake from pain and throw a man twice your size across a room before they know where they are. You should be careful." Lyria bit her lip, trying to hold back the tight ache in her chest. "I'm not afraid of him," Bracken sighed, frustrated. "That's exactly what scares me." For a long moment, neither spoke. The wind rustled through the cottonwoods, breaking the silence. Bracken leaned in slightly. "Just do your work and leave when you're told. Don't stay late. Don't get close. And don't let him look at you the way he was looking just now." Heat crept into her face before she could stop it. She turned away. "Go home for tonight," Bracken said. "Come back tomorrow before dusk. And keep your distance." She nodded slowly, though her heart didn't agree. Something inside her tugged at her chest, pulling her back toward the warm glow of the cabin window where Callan lay alone. She didn't know why she felt drawn to him, or why his voice saying her name still echoed in her ears. When she finally headed toward the wagon waiting near the fence, she felt Callan's gaze even through the cabin walls. As she rode toward town, the moon rose behind her. She looked back once, unable to stop herself. The cabin was a single ember glowing in the dark, lonely and silent. Holding secrets she was only beginning to touch. She didn't sleep that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she felt the warmth of Callan's skin beneath her palms, the quiet strength of his breath, the way his hand had lifted just enough to brush her wrist. That moment replayed again and again, stirring questions she wasn't ready to answer. By morning, the town was already alive with whispers. Folks sitting outside the saloon nodded at her in a way they hadn't before. A few women by the well hushed their voices when she walked past. Casting glances toward the ranch road, rumors spread fast in small frontier towns, especially when Apache warriors were involved. Lyria kept her head down, but inside unease coiled tight. She knew something was stirring beneath the surface, something bigger than her late-night tending to an injured man. There was a reason Bracken kept checking the cabin, a reason the ranch hands refused to go near Callan, a reason they hired her instead of someone stronger. She just didn't know what it was yet. By late afternoon, She made her way back toward the ranch. As she traveled the long dirt road, she noticed fresh tracks, deeper than ordinary horse prints. Wagons had passed through. Heavy ones. And not ranch wagons either. She stopped, crouching a little to examine them. The wheels had iron edges. A military supply cart, maybe? Or traders. Why would anyone visit the ranch out here? Her heart thudded. When she neared the cabin clearing, she saw Bracken talking to two men she didn't recognize. One wore a long coat and carried a rifle slung across his back. The other had a scar stretching from his jaw to his ear. They paused when they spotted her, their eyes following her too closely. Bracken walked to her quickly. "You're early. I came to check on him," she said quietly. The scarred man tilted his head, studying her. "This the girl you hired?" Bracken nodded stiffly. Scarred man smirked. "She looks softer than you said." Lyria straightened her spine, biting back her anger. The man in the long coat stepped forward. "We'll be at the main ranch house. Make sure no one disturbs us." Bracken gave a tense nod. The two men headed off toward the barn, their footsteps heavy. Lyria turned to Bracken once they were out of sight. "Who are they?" He glanced toward the ranch house, then back at her. "Best you don't ask. I'm already involved," she whispered, not in the way they're about to be. His words chilled her. When Lyria finally stepped into the cabin again, the air inside was different. Still warm, still faintly scented with sage and smoke, but sharper somehow. Bracken had said Kaylin would be fine for a moment the night before, but something told her that moment was already over. Kaylin lifted his eyes toward her the instant she entered, and Lyria knew, deep in her bones, that whatever danger Bracken feared was no longer outside the cabin. It was already awake, already watching, already waiting for her next step. The moment Lyria stepped fully inside, the door eased shut behind her with a faint thud. She stood still, letting her eyes adjust to the dim orange glow of the hearth. Kaylin's gaze followed her with the same quiet fire she had felt the night before. Only this time there was something sharper behind it. Awareness, caution, maybe even warning. She approached slowly. "Are you in pain?" she asked, her voice softer than she intended. Kaylin didn't speak at first. He studied her as if trying to read thoughts she hadn't spoken yet. His bandaged side rose and fell with slow, controlled breaths. Then his lips parted, and his voice came rough and low. "You came back." She swallowed. "I said I would." His eyes drifted to the door, then back to her. "Danger follows men like me." "I know," she whispered, though she didn't know nearly as much as she pretended. "But I am not here to harm you." Kaylin pushed himself up slightly on one elbow, wincing from the movement. The blanket slid down enough to reveal the full breadth of his chest, the shadows carving along muscle and scars. Lyria tried to force her eyes to stay steady, but the sight tightened her breath anyway. He watched her reaction. For a heartbeat, neither spoke. Then suddenly, he shifted his weight and sat up more fully. It startled her enough to take a step back. "You should not be near those men outside," he murmured. "Their eyes carry hunger." Lyria frowned. "You mean the strangers who came earlier?" Kaylin nodded once, slow and sure. "What do they want?" she asked. He hesitated, looking toward the small window where fading daylight touched the glass. Outside, shadows moved across the yard. Voices murmured near the barn. The men in long coats had not left. Kaylin's jaw tightened. "My tribe has enemies. Some hide behind badges, some behind ranch walls. But why come here? Why now?" Lyria asked, her pulse quickening. Kaylin didn't answer. Instead, he shifted his gaze fully back to her, locking her in place. There was a question in his eyes, one he hadn't spoken but wanted her to understand. As if he wondered whether she was someone who could be trusted with truths men had died to protect. Before she could speak, heavy footsteps approached the cabin. Lyria turned quickly. Bracken stepped inside without knocking. His eyes flicked from her to Kaylin. The tension in the room sharpened again. "You," Bracken said, pointing at Lyria, "need to finish up quick tonight. No staying after dark." She nodded, but something in his voice felt wrong. It wasn't irritation. It wasn't even worry. It was fear disguised as orders. Bracken stepped closer, lowering his tone. Things are changing around this ranch. You need to be careful about who you talk to. Kalen's eyes narrowed at the man's back. Bracken didn't see it, or maybe he did and pretended he didn't. Do your work, Bracken said under his breath, but don't ask questions. He left as quickly as he came, closing the door hard behind him. Lyria exhaled shakily. What is going on, Kalen? The warrior didn't answer. Instead, he shifted slightly and motioned for her to come closer. She walked to his side again, kneeling with her oils and cloths. Her hands trembled slightly, though she tried to hide it. He could see everything. She knew that now. As she pressed her palms gently along the tight muscles of his upper arm, Kalen closed his eyes. But this time, it wasn't from comfort. It was restraint. Like every breath he took was weighed against something he couldn't control. You feel it, he murmured softly. The storm that waits. She hesitated, fingers pausing on his skin. Yes. His eyes opened slowly. Then listen to that feeling. It will keep you alive. Her heart pounded harder. Kalen, if there is danger, I need to know. He exhaled slow. Some men hunt for land. Some for power. Some hunt for blood. The ones outside hunt for all three. She shivered. And you, she whispered. What do they want with you? Kalen didn't look away. He didn't soften his gaze. To finish what they started? Lyria felt the weight of those words settle heavy in her chest. She didn't understand all of it, but she understood enough. Those men weren't visitors. They were hunters. And Kalen wasn't just an injured warrior. He was a target. She worked along his ribs next, careful but firm, trying to ease the tightness in his muscles. Every time her hands pressed down, he let out a breath he hadn't meant to release, as if the pain hid deeper than the wounds on his skin. You're healing, she said gently, trying to offer something hopeful. Kalen let out a faint sound that wasn't quite a laugh. Healing does not make a man safe. Her throat tightened. She didn't know how to argue that. Outside, a horse whinnied loudly. Heavy boots crossed the yard. She could hear one of the strangers giving orders. Another voice mentioned the cabin, mentioned checking something inside. Lyria froze, her hand still resting on Kalen's side. He noticed instantly. Stay calm. How can I stay calm when they're coming here? She whispered. Kalen's hand lifted with sharp precision and caught her wrist before she could pull away. His grip was strong but warm, grounding her like a weight, pulling her back from panic. Fear makes you visible, he said softly. Her breath trembled. And what makes me invisible? His fingers slid slightly along her wrist, gentle but commanding. Stillness. Before she could answer, someone banged on the cabin wall. Not the door, the wall. As if testing its strength, Kalen's grip tightened. He didn't move his gaze from hers. Do not go to that door tonight. Lyria's chest tightened with dread. But they'll expect do not. The tone in his voice held no room for argument. It wasn't loud. It wasn't harsh. It was the voice of a warrior who had survived too many battles to doubt his instincts now. Footsteps circled the cabin, slow, heavy, measuring. Lyria could feel the floorboards tremble. Beneath her knees, Kalen leaned back slightly, jaw clenching as pain shot through him. She moved quickly to help steady him, her hand pressing gently against his shoulder. He didn't push her away. The footsteps paused near the door. A shadow filled the crack under it. Her breath stopped. Someone's in there, a voice outside. Muttered, let me see another. Answered. Lyria's pulse thundered in her ears. Kalen's fingers brushed her hand again, steadying her. Do not move. A moment later, the cabin latch rattled, twice harder the second time. Lyria's breath caught Kalen's eyes, sharpened into something fierce. He straightened as much as his body allowed, lifting his chin like a man preparing for a fight he wasn't strong enough to win, but would face anyway. The door didn't open instead. A deep voice outside muttered something she couldn't make out, followed by the sound of boots walking away toward the barn. The silence that followed was thick, enough to choke on. Lyria finally exhaled, but her hand still trembled. She sank to the floor for a moment, pressing a palm against her forehead. "They know," she whispered. Kaelin watched her carefully. "They suspect." "Not know? What's the difference?" "One gives time," he said quietly. "The other takes it away." She lifted her eyes to him. "Why do they want you gone?" Kaelin's gaze darkened. "Because I carry something they want, something they think belongs to them." Her heart beat faster. "What is it?" He hesitated. A long, heavy pause filled the space between them. Then he reached slowly for a piece of leather tucked beneath the buffalo hide. It was stained with earth and smoke. Worn from travel? He held it just enough to show its shape, not enough for her to see what it protected. Lyria leaned forward, curiosity mixing with fear. Kaelin stopped her with a small shake of his head. "Not yet." "Why not?" "Because once you know, there is no going back." Her breath trembled. He wasn't trying to scare her. He was stating a truth. "But you trust me enough to warn me?" she asked. He held her gaze for a long moment. "I trust your heart, not your world." The words warmed her and frightened her all at once. The fire crackled louder, throwing sparks into the air. Outside, the voices of the strangers carried through the night. One of them shouted for a lantern. Another mentioned the ridge. Another spoke Kaelin's name. Lyria felt the tension, coiled tighter around the cabin like a rope, ready to snap. She reached for her oils again, trying to resume her work, but her hands shook too much. Kaelin lifted one hand gently and placed it over hers. "You must decide," he murmured. "Decide what?" she asked, her voice low. "Whether you walk away from this place before the storm breaks, and if I don't." His eyes softened in a way that made her heart twist painfully. "Then you will be part of it." Before she could answer, a loud crash echoed across the yard. A lantern shattered. A horse screamed. Men shouted. Kaelin reached for the edge of the blanket. His jaw set. The storm, he warned her, about wasn't coming. It had already begun. The smash of the lantern cut through the night like a warning shot. Lyria jerked to her feet as voices spilled across the yard, men barking orders, hooves scraping the dirt. The fire inside the cabin flickered hard against the logs, shadows jumping like restless spirits. Kaelin pushed himself up on one elbow, breath tight with pain, but his eyes sharpened with the instinct of a warrior. Hearing the first stir of trouble he had expected for days, Lyria rushed to him. "You need to stay down. Your wounds will open." Kaelin shook his head. "Staying down will kill me faster." She steadied him as he forced himself upright. His muscles trembled under her hands, but the power beneath the weakness still thrummed like a buried river. His shoulders rose and fell with heavy breaths, each one a struggle, yet his gaze remained unbroken. Outside, bootsteps pounded across the hard earth. A man yelled for more rifles. Another shouted about tracks leading toward the canyon. The sound of metal clanking reached the cabin, sharp and unsettling. "They are hunting," Kaelin said, his voice low. "Not just for me. For what I carry?" Her stomach tightened. "You said it was something dangerous. Something men would kill for." He reached again for the folded leather pouch beneath the buffalo hide, gripping it tightly. "If they take this, the peace between tribes and settlers will end. Land will burn. Blood will run." His eyes locked on hers. "They believe power rests in the hands of whoever holds it." She whispered. His silence was answer enough. A fist slammed against the cabin door, making the hinges shake. Lyria gasped and stepped back. Kaelin grabbed the side of the bed, struggling to rise, but pain hurled him back down. She caught him before he collapsed fully, lowering him with careful hands. The voice outside called out sharply, "Open up." "We know the girl is in there." Another voice followed, colder. In the Apache, Lyria's heartbeat hammered against her ribs. She had never feared the night before, never feared shadows or wild tales of outlaws, but tonight felt different. Tonight the dark seemed filled with eyes watching, waiting. Kaelin reached for her hand, gripping it firmly. "Do not open the door. They'll force their way in," she whispered. "They already know." They suspect, he repeated softly. Not know. She didn't have the breath to argue. Footsteps moved away from the door, then circled the cabin. She felt the vibration travel through the wood beneath her boots. Where's Bracken? She whispered, hoping for an ally. Kalen shook his head. The foreman fears them. He cannot protect you. Not from this. She glanced toward the small window near the hearth. Shadows passed over it. Someone was climbing onto the crates outside, trying to peek inside. Lyria moved quickly and pulled the curtain down, letting the fire cast its light only inward. You must leave, Kalen said suddenly. Go through the back window. Ride to town. There is still time. She turned to him sharply. I'm not leaving you, his jaw clenched, frustration and worry blending together. I will not have your life risked for mine. You didn't ask me to risk it, she said softly. I chose to. He stared at her then, really stared, as though searching her face for a way to understand a choice that made no sense to him. His fingers brushed lightly against hers, not gripping now, only touching. His voice dropped. You are not part of this war. Maybe not, she whispered back. But I'm here, and I'm not running. The moment hung between them, heavy and trembling like a wire stretched too tight. Another crash shook the cabin. Someone kicked the back wall. The wood creaked under the force. The men were tiring of waiting. Kalen's eyes flicked toward the corner where his spear once leaned. It was gone, taken by Bracken days earlier for safety. The warrior clenched his jaw. They disarmed me. They won't get in yet, Lyria said, though she wasn't sure she believed it. We need to think. He breathed deeply, then pushed his back against the log wall, anchoring himself upright. Listen, if they break in, stand behind me. No matter what happens. I'm not hiding while you're hurt, she said, shaking her head. Kalen exhaled hard. Your courage is strong. But courage alone does not stop bullets. A rumble of voices outside rose again. One man shouted, Search the barn, then the sheds. The girl must have left tracks. Another voice snapped. If she's inside with him, we'll drag them both out. Lyria swallowed hard. What do they want with me? Kalen didn't hesitate. To use you against me. The realization struck her like ice. She stepped back, breath shaking. Because I've been helping you? Because they saw your fear, he said softly. And because they saw your care. She blinked, stunned. No one had ever said something like that to her. And certainly not a man like him. Somewhere under the fear and chaos, her chest tightened with something warmer, something confusing. Kalen looked toward the door again, shoulders tense. They believe affection is weakness. They will try to twist it. Lyria felt a slow shiver pass through her. The strangers outside had watched her too closely earlier, examined her too openly. Not because she looked harmless, but because she looked connected. She turned back to him. What do we do? Kalen shifted and winced as pain shot through his side. She moved instinctively, supporting him again. He didn't pull away. We wait, he said. And when the moment comes, we move. But move where? She asked. His gaze slid toward the back window. Into the canyon. Into the land where their boots stumble and their eyes fail. Her breath caught. Because you know it better. 'Cause it knows me, he corrected quietly. She felt him tense under her. Hands, as another set of heavy footsteps neared the porch fire. From the hearth, through long shadows over the walls, the air grew heavy, almost hard to breathe. The cabin seemed too small now, too fragile against the force gathering outside. Kalen lifted the leather pouch again, holding it with reverence that made her realize just how important it truly was. This, he said, is the proof of peace. But in the wrong hands, it becomes a weapon. What is inside? She asked. He hesitated, then slowly loosened the fold just enough for her to see the edge of something carved into wood. She couldn't make out the full markings, but what she saw was enough to raise goosebumps along her arms. Symbols layered and deep, not English, not simple art. It was given to me by the chiefs, he said. A promise of new ground. A covenant. But greed has no patience, and men in those coats want to break it before it roots, and they think killing you will stop it. Lyria exhaled shakily. What if they find out you still have it? Caitlin's eyes darkened. Then this cabin will not be standing by dawn. A door slammed outside. Someone cursed loudly. Another man shouted that they found footprints near the stream. More boots gathered near the porch. Lyria's pulse jumped. Caitlin, they're coming back. He took her hand again, firmer this time. Then we move before they do. But you can barely stand. His voice softened, though the tension inside him didn't fade. With your help, I can walk. Her heart jumped, not from fear this time, but from the weight of his trust. Outside, the men began arguing, their voices rising. She's inside. I'm telling you. I saw movement in the window. She's tending him. She'll listen if we threaten her. No, the Apache will fight if she gets touched. Caitlin's jaw tightened. His hand gripped hers harder. Lyria felt panic swirl, but beneath it, something steadier rose. A resolve she didn't know she had. Caitlin, she whispered, we have to go now. Nodded once. Help me stand. She slipped one arm under his, bracing his weight against her shoulder. He rose slowly, every muscle straining, pain etched along his jaw but held back by iron will. His breath came in sharp pulls as he stood upright, taller and stronger than she remembered, but wounded enough to make each movement dangerous. A man outside shouted, light it. Smoke them out. Lyria froze. They wouldn't. Caitlin's voice was grim. They would. She pulled him toward the back window. Smoke wouldn't fill the cabin yet, but once flames caught, the dry logs stacked outside, they would be trapped. The wind picked up, rattling the shutters. Boots scraped across the porch. Metal clinked. A match struck. Caitlin leaned heavily against her, but his eyes were sharp, focused on escape as the first wisp of smoke curled past the cracks of the front wall. Lyria lifted the back window with trembling hands. Caitlin touched her shoulder gently, his breath warm against her ear. When we go, he whispered, stay close to me. Do not let go. Not for anything. I won't, she breathed. Behind them, someone shouted as fire caught the first stack of kindling. Another man laughed cruelly. The crackle of flames rose into the night. Lyria helped Caitlin through the window just as smoke began to seep in thicker. The night air hit her face, cold and sharp. But the danger was closer than breath. Men were circling the cabin, and Caitlin was barely standing, but she held on to him, refusing to loosen her grip as the flames behind them grew brighter, and the voices of their hunters closed in. The canyon waited. Ahead, the danger waited behind, and the next step would decide whether they lived long enough to reach the coming sunrise. Lyria guided Caitlin into the dark field behind the cabin, her arm wrapped firmly around his waist as he leaned into her for balance. Smoke rose behind them in rising waves, glowing orange against the night sky. Men shouted at the flames, realizing too late that the fire might spread beyond their reach. The confusion bought her and Caitlin a few precious breaths of time. The forest line waited just ahead, a barrier of shadows and wind that promised both danger and protection. By the time they reached the first tree, Caitlин's breath was shaking. Lyria stopped, turning him gently to face her. She brushed the sweat from his brow and studied the strain in his eyes. You cannot push more than this, she whispered. We have to stop. Caitlin shook his head, but his legs buckled slightly. She reached for him before he fell, easing him down to the base of an old pine. He leaned back, drawing in slow breaths to steady himself. They will follow, he murmured. Not yet, she said. They're still fighting the fire. They don't know where we went. Caitlin lifted his gaze to her, the firelight behind them casting a faint glow across her face. You should have run when I told you. Alone you could have escaped, leave you to die in that cabin, she said. Never. A soft expression crossed his face, something gentle but fierce at the same time. You were not meant for this fight, he said. I chose it, she replied, her voice steady. I chose to stay with you. He didn't argue again. Lyria turned her attention to his wounds. The leather pouch he carried was still strapped across his chest, the symbol of peace he had sworn to protect. She adjusted the bandages carefully, avoiding the worst of the torn flesh. and pressed her hand lightly to his side to slow the bleeding. Kalen closed his eyes and leaned his head back, trusting her touch without question. Minutes passed, long and quiet. The night deepened, hiding them beneath its blanket. When Kalen opened his eyes again, he found Lyria looking toward the canyon, her face thoughtful. "You said this land knows you," she whispered. "Then lead me through it." He nodded and lifted a hand for her to help him rise. She steadied him with both arms, and together they moved deeper into the woods, following the faint path carved by deer and wind. The forest stretched wide and still, yet Kalen walked with the memory of every stone and bend, guiding her through the safest way. When they reached the canyon, moonlight spilled across the riverbed like silver dust. The water flowed low that night, revealing a strip of earth that would hide their tracks. Lyria helped Kalen step down slowly, the cool water brushing against their boots. Every breath she took tasted of wild sage. "Kalen," she whispered, "if those men find us again, what will they do with the peace you carry?" "They will twist it into war," he said. "That is why we must protect it, and why I cannot let you be taken." "I am not afraid anymore," she said. He turned his head slightly, surprise touching his voice. "Why not?" "Because I'm with you." The canyon walls softened the sounds of the forest, sending back their words in faint echoes. They crossed downstream until Kalen stopped at the mouth of a narrow trail. He steadied himself against the stone and pointed upward. "My people wait beyond that ridge," he said. "If I reach them, the covenant will be kept." Lyria tightened her grip around him. "Then we climb." He gave her a long look, the kind that held both gratitude and something deeper. "You have the courage of a hawk," he said softly. "Not many would walk beside a wounded warrior in the dark." She smiled faintly. "Not many warriors would trust a maiden who knew nothing of blades or battles." His hand brushed hers lightly. "I trust your heart." They climbed together, Kalen leaning on her strength when he faltered. By the time they reached the top, the moon had shifted far across the sky. A wide valley stretched below, filled with the soft glow of scattered fires. Apache warriors gathered around them, rising to attention the moment Kalen appeared between the trees. One stepped forward. Older than the rest, his hair braided with white strands. "Kalen," he said, voice heavy with relief. "We thought the worst." Kalen bowed his head. "I would not fall while the covenant remains." His people surrounded him, steadying him and guiding him toward shelter. Lyria started to step back, unsure if she belonged among them. But Kalen reached for her hand before she moved. "She saved my life," he said to the elder. "Without her, the covenant would be ash." The elder studied her with a long, deep gaze, then nodded slowly. "A heart that protects peace is welcome here." Lyria felt a warmth rise inside her, something deeper than simple relief. The warriors tended Kalen's wounds through the night. Lyria stayed near him, giving water, helping where she could, listening as his people spoke of the coming sunrise and the hope the covenant carried. As dawn touched the valley, the elder approached her once more. "You came with him through danger," he said, "and he lives because of your courage. What do you seek now?" Lyria looked toward Kalen, who rested with steadier breaths and clearer eyes than he had in days. Her voice held no hesitation. "I seek peace for him," she said, "in a place where the world does not tear people apart." The elder nodded with slow understanding. "Then you may remain, if that is your choice." Kalen opened his eyes at the words and looked toward her, a faint smile softening the darkness in his gaze. She moved to his side and took his hand. He squeezed it gently. "You walked through fire for me," he murmured, "and you trusted me in the dark," she said. His voice dropped lower. "If you stay, I will stand with you, not as a wounded man, as a man who found strength because of you." Her breath trembled with a quiet joy she had not expected. "Then I will stay." The sunrise broke fully across the valley then, gold and warm, painting the land in a way that made everything look new. The elders prepared the covenant stone, carved with ancient markings, ready to be carried to the meeting place between both worlds. Kalen rose slowly with their support, but when he stepped toward Lyria, he did so on his own strength. "Walk with me," he said. She nodded. slipping her hand into his. They crossed the valley together. The wind brushed through the pines. The world felt lighter, as if the danger had been carried away with the night. The men who hunted them would face justice. Bracken would tell the truth, and the peace Kalen protected would finally reach the hands. It's meant to keep it safe. When they reached the ridge overlooking the frontier, Kalen stopped and turned to her. The morning sun glowed on his skin, warming the last cold shadows from his face. "You gave me life again," he said. "Not as a warrior. As a man who can hope." Lyria felt her eyes warm. "And you gave me a place where I belong." He lifted her hand to his chest, covering it with his own. "This land will remember your courage," he said. "And so will I." The wind moved softly around them, carrying the scent of pine, smoke, and new beginnings. Kalen leaned closer, resting his forehead gently against hers, a promise without words. And in that quiet moment, the world settled into peace. Together, they walked toward the future waiting beyond the canyon. Hand in hand, hearts steady. Knowing the storm was behind them and the sunrise ahead, and that was how a young maiden and a wounded Apache warrior found not only safety, but a home in each other's courage, turning danger into hope and fear into a bond strong enough to change both their worlds.